this is something that is actually modified by the Mayan people. You don't get to see this a lot in many of the Maya city. Probably only Tikal and Xunantunich where you find these. In Maya, they call this the shultun, which means a storage underground. Some Mayan people build a storage area within their complex, but some of them seems to modify a cavern where the archaeologists discovered some jars that contains evidences of corn, contains evidences of beans. The beans that were discovered here were wide pod. It's not like the red beans or the pinto beans or the black beans that we have today. This is a species that you do not find today. What we have today, it seems to be like a like sort of genetical stuff, modified stuff. That's what we have today. But the dating of the artifacts seems around 400 years before Christ, and it's also related with the usage of the buildings that is around here. In the later times, the archaeologists discovered 3 bodies in here, but the 3 bodies, some goes with some small incense burner, jars, and even some, you know, like pistol form. And the dating of these dates around the 800 AD, where the archaeologists understand that probably in the early classic, people were using these as storage ground. But in the later times, when the civilization started to go through a downfall, the Mayan people were not storing goods over here. They were using this as part of a burial. Hence, they find 3 bodies. When they did the analysis of the bones, this is what I mentioned earlier, that people that seems to live here comes from the mountains, Mountain Pine Ridge area, which is just about an hour and a half drive from here in the mountains, right? One of the body has a shell, like a turtle shell up to the chest, that seems to be used probably for drumming. This is what they call the group D, that seems to be on the eastern side of the entire epicenter itself. So it has a road, a wide road, a 14 meters wide, what they call sakbe, which means white road, that shows parapet on both sides, going down, going all the way, entering to the ceremonial courtyard. The reason why they have probably a parapet, they're looking at more ceremonial activity, taking possessions of these ceremonies, might allows the Mayan people to visit the cardinal points of the city, and lastly unite into the center and conclude their ceremony. That is where they find a stela, and you can also see the stela right there on the ground, see, plain one. Most of these are plain today, but before they might have profiles of kings. It goes with the name of the king, family members, and the date when it was commissioned. Some of these are commissioned every cycle of 20 years. Some of them are commissioned every cycle of 10 years, right? So this is what they called probably, you know, a small little temple farm, but the ancestral shrine is this one over here. Looting occurs in the earlier times. This one is never exposed for public anymore, right? They're still doing excavation here. Every July they come, August, first, second week of August, they go back again. The archaeologists who are focusing here, they come from the University of Texas. The other side, behind this mount that we're looking, is badly looting. So they don't have a plan of exposing this for public, other that they're only using it for a master, like a research, understanding how many pieces of building and what all you can find here. About 3 years they excavate here where they find the body, they find a burial, they find the plastered floor, and this is also a stela. So 2 years ago they excavate here where they also find a body itself, right? So 2 bodies were actually discovered here.
Wow.
This July that went, they tried to create a uniform excavation where they find the stairs. They tried to cut through the stairs where they understand 2 phases, 2 modifications of building. They have not yet cut into the rooms, so we don't know exactly what is inside. Right, so that's what I can tell you.
Wow.
Good?
Yeah, that's amazing.
When they shift the center of their city from here to the other side of the major palace that was lately constructed, this becomes the preparation of their food source. I think they have a piece of jar right there, which you can still see, which is this one. See? This is somehow like the angles are the side of the jar, But what you find, dark object inside, which means that probably they're using based on fire, it gets dark, or whatever hot stuff that you place inside, it also gets dark. These are evidences of partial kitchen materials that is lately collected around this era. What I can tell you too, that when the archaeologists did excavation here, they found some bodies, some tombs, some crypts, but these seems to be for females. You can see the hip bones that are pretty much wide. Their height are very shorter than the males we saw in the museum, and the spine seems to be like this, right? So one of the things that forensic anthropologists and even archaeologists try to understand, the activity that these females were doing. Today, modern societies are more into technology. Somehow we try to make life easy even though it's hard. For babies, we use a stroller. Fetching the water is not happening anymore. But if you look at what the Mayans were doing, you see how thick the jar is? See? A huge jar might has about 10, 12, or 15 pounds. Water put inside, it makes it an additional 5 or 6 pounds. But how these people were fetching their water is from the head, or they were fetching water from the side. The kids like these were never meant to be, walk like this, but they were fetched on the back too, with the use of the head. They were responsible for cleaning the entire interior part of the buildings, creation of food sources. We also get to understand that males are more outdoors than indoors. So grinding of the corn is done on the grinding stone, which they call the manos and the matapi. The weaving for attire is also done by the females. You can find a spindle whorl, which they use probably for creation of thread, in some of the burials of the females. Some ornamental stuff like canine of animals, jade elements, or shell ornaments, those are the type of necklace that they use. But based on the diet, it seems like diet seems to be like less nutrition, that seems to create like porous bones, or even the spines, probably because of major activities. When they get older, they stay like these spines. That is what you can find here.
Wow.
That leads you to the medial terrace, which enters you into a small courtyard, which they call the interpatio, and it also takes you all the way at the very top. That's how it was. But
So it's all buried now,
it's
but
all buried. They only did seasonal excavation here, but most of their work is backfilled over again. We don't get to see exactly how these rooms are. How these
and they're doing it to protect from looters?
No, they're looking at funding, time, and also the
What are they using for mortar in between the stones? Is it mud or some kind of ash they're creating as glue?
No. These stones that you see, that one there, these are limestones, right? Limestone is something very easy to shape and cut, and it also seems to be porous, that provides probably light weight to carry from a distance places to do architectural works. But what I can tell you that limestone, when you place it into fire, throughout the past or throughout the time, it eventually powderized, right? So it seems like these are what the Mayan people were using in the earlier times to cement it. Some of their brick forms to create their plaster. Everything seems to be smooth in their times. This occurs in the pre-classic, early classic era. When the downfall existed, some buildings that are abandoned seems to be bricked intentionally to construct new buildings that is just within the ruling class complex. But what they're using as a mortar. Calpech is one of the early cities that was established at or in Belize. It is located in San Ignacio town today, right? One of the beautiful towns in the Cayo district. And that is where the archaeologists find over 250 dogs, bones. They found canines of dogs that seems to be used for ornamental stuff. They found marine shells, where understanding that the bones along with the marine shells were being burned, crushed and burned together. When they observe the architectures of those type of buildings, you find chippings of marine shells within it. You also find these at Caracol, which means that the Mayan people seems to be burning some sort of animal bones, marine bones, to provide probably the solidity or the strength of the building in the later times. Probably we're looking at, the archaeologists are more in depth into looking at what is happening to the downfall of the Mayan people. They're looking at the amount of labor that they want to build a bigger palaces or buildings. So instead of having that amount of labor to produce stuff, simply what they're consuming, the bones or the animals, becomes to get burnt and used as part of a mortar. That's probably an adequate answer. I can
That's a
give.
great answer, actually.
You want a vacuum? Yes.
Oh. Okay.
And we don't consider.
Uh-huh.
Around inside the rooms.
Uh-huh.
This is the only place where they find this. Most Maya site does not have these. It has a comparison in South Mexico. The dating of the building is 900 AD. In the last room is where they find a game graffiti on the floor. But the archaeologists were unable to extract the game, so what they did, they sealed it off. We do not get to see it. When they come back next year, probably they are going to work on that, extract the type of game that they did. It's used for an ancestral shrine. Most the buildings like this, you don't find a large bed farm. Bed farm comes in an L shape, U shape, that seems to be maybe 3 feet or 2 feet above the ground, the floor itself, that are used for residential areas. But this does not displace any of those. So they refer to it as an ancestral shrine. Even they find incense burner that provide unique stuff of the usage of the building. But here you can see their profile. What you're looking at there is a reproduction of the original one. 1996 is when they placed the replica. The original one is 1 meter behind it. This is where the archaeologists tried to get inside the building, but it crumbles on top of them. So they seal it off. This is an arch, a doorway. In most understanding that these arcs that you see is above 3 doorways. Probably it's decorating around it. But because of the last major construction effort that probably breaks the north and the south arcs, where you can see rooms in front and rooms over here that provide access all the way to the very top. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Good?
Mm-hmm.
Political issues probably is taking place here in the later time. So this is why probably the archaeologists call it the El Castillo, which means the castle, rather than a palace. A palace normally shows an armrest, a bench form with armrest, which they call the throne, but you do not find it here. You don't find the throne here. Excuse me?
Sorry.
We're almost touching the clouds.
We're 120 feet up right now?
130 feet
130.
all the way from the plaza floor. So you're looking at Benque Viejo del Carmen right there, the last town via Guatemala in Belize. Almost at the end of the quarry is where they have the immigration office. Not the yellow building. Those yellow buildings are business places. A little bit more on that side, that's where the immigration office is. Guatemala begins from here. That's a town in Guatemala which they call Melchor de Mencos. In the Petén state. Petén state is one of the largest states in Guatemala that even takes you all the way to the Pacific.
Wow.
That's how it is. Our highest range of mountain is all the way there, which is close to 4,000 feet, and that is where Caracal is located. All over here is the mountain pine ridge, a savanna ecosystem, where most understanding that people seems to be creating a movement from here, creating the group D, and occupying all of these. Right? Yes? See the monkey? See the monkey right there?
The angle? Well, I'm putting kind of the background. Cut off my head right here. Oh yeah.
Central building.
Right
That's
here,
when they
and
July, August they're working there, but they haven't done any trenching. They begin the excavation of the last piece, but they never finished, so they covered their work with the tarp. But the body that we saw in the museum, this is covered within this first temple right here. Right? We're going down in a while.
easy.
A long lipped tongue, which they call Chak, the rain god. Chak is the name of the rain god, believed to be recited from the underworld. The U shape on both sides of Chak represents their moon god, Ishel, the god of healing and weaving. The corner mask that looks identical based on their feature is what they call the Pash god, which represents the world tree in the middle of their universe, right? So this world tree is sustaining the star urge of heaven, and it's also used as the central part of communication from the gods, 9 gods that exist controlling the underworld, and 13 gods controlling the heaven. That's what they believe in, right? Then above the rain god, you can see the X from the forehead of the rain god. Above the X, there's a feature that looks like a nostril. On the left hand side, there are 3 columns. One is plain and 2 is carved. Above the 2 that is carved, you can see the headed serpent. On the right hand side of that central figure, 3 plain columns that exist where the archaeologists did not found anything there. But the central feature is what they understand representing the water lily, watery underworld. The headed serpent marks the rise of the sun to the east. The setting of the sun to the west is a conversion of a jaguar that challenges the 9 gods of the underworld. But nothing is discovered there, probably because of the root system of the trees that breaks most of it.
You see them fight?
Yeah, monkeys are
yeah.
fighting over there, see?
Yeah.
Monkeys are very fighting. 1950 is when Hamilton Anderson exposed a portion of these. In the 60s, Eric Thompson exposed it for public. 70s, it is out there, original was there, but climate change started to affect it. 1986 is when they placed the reproduction of the original one. So the original one is 1 meter behind, preserved now. We are only looking for a fiberglass made out of stock. It seems to be original, but it's not original. They also, if the world tree is,
Them their shade, their shoes.
yeah, if you want the camera, get some picture for us. Here, let me give you the camera. Here, get some pictures. Here. See, nice picture, nice picture. Get some picture for us. If the world tree is holding the center of their universe, what they also believe is that the corner of the heaven is held by a short individual. So this is displayed on the arts, which you can see above the airfare of the Pashga there, and one over here, but this one is a little bit eroded. Over there you can see Claire with his hands held up like this. Atlas believe that Atlas is holding their universe,
Them
right? One individual. But this is a civilization where they use this four, which they call the Bakabs. That's what they call it. Yes, they are coming closer now. That's a brain, the head rolling down, like how he have it in the movie. We do not know. What I can tell you that evidences had been found inside a cave where most human sacrifices remains there. You find decapitation and you find trauma on the cranium. Those are the 2 ways of sacrifices that you can find, But this occurs from the 700 AD to a 900 AD, intensifying in most of our cave system today. Also, geologists trying to understand the growth of the formation can tell you a lot more. That certain period of time the formation went dormant. So when they did the comparisons of the dry formation in the cave to what the Mayans were doing, this is about the time when feature begins to change. Yeah, then, but we were up here earlier. We were earlier. The central column is this one that supports the roofing cones. So this is a separate building, a range building that has 13 doorways that seems to regulate the flow of public to the upper private areas up there. But when the time it rains, this is a building that is separated apart from the major building that you're looking here, where they have like an aqueduct. Collection of water existed and takes it into the water reservoir. What we do not know is that the other side of this, where they have the interpatia, where they did the 9-meter trench, some archaeologists believe that water seems to be held there for a period of time, and to a certain extent they release it and takes it away to the water reservoir too. Maybe they preserve their water up here instead of going all the way there and bring it in. Maybe they have
They
a
had a
way
reservation system in here.
Exactly. You see this at Calpech, and you find this at Caracol too, where they have a water reservoir just within the city itself. Makes it much easier.
And they would drink and use it for cooking, whatever they needed.
We know that major water reservoir is used for irrigational stuff. These might be only used for maintenance of the family up here, right? But what I can tell you, the three major construction efforts that existed here, 400 years before Christ, the first building underneath, 450 AD is actually when the Mayan people here, the Mayan people built a palace farm where the staircase starts from point A into the palace about this level that has a small courtyard in the middle surrounded with doorways. 750 AD, they modified all of that. Maybe it reaches a little bit over there. That also has a small courtyard surrounded with range buildings. 850 AD is when the Mayan people modified all of these to get all the way at the very top where the staircase didn't carry from point A to point B. But what they did, they built this range building. A water system is over here. The way to go up is that way. The way to come down seems to be on the opposite side. They make it more into a confusional way, probably because of mechanism of warfare or conflicts that existed. Right? That's what I can tell you. Come here.
Well, that piece right there is pretty easy for me, honestly.
Those are their feature. Bold feature. Nose are wide, forehead seems to be wide, cheeks seems to be fat. What I can tell you about this is that
You see the big mountain?
that's a temple. That's a temple we see the other time you don't remember. Okay. They did not find the remains of the arts here. When it is done purposely by the Mayan people, it has to be symmetrically done. One on this side, one on the other side. Either one here, one on the other side of the building. It has to be symmetrical when it's done for a purpose. This one seems to be on purpose. It's because you find it that way instead of vertically. Mostly arts that is done purposely is standing. This one is horizontal. You don't find it on the other side. But what I can tell you that when the Dongfal existed here around 850 AD, 900 AD, they built the shrine, and they also built their residence over there. That means they abandoned the northern palace where the kings existed. So this is the only place that they're trying to maintain. But again, buildings, limestone seems to be deteriorated throughout the past. So what they did is that restored works that allows fittings. Some arts becomes useful in their society in the later times, which they also use. Probably this is one of the arts that seems to be useful that it just fit nicely and perfectly just over there for filling. And this is what the archaeologists understand about it. But the eyes seems, if you look at the eyes, seems to be crossed, which they also understand that this is an Olmec feature that represents the sun god, right? That's what they believe. Acton Khan, one of the pre-classic tongue. 6 miles to the east, there is Buena Vista del Cayo. About 9 miles to the actual east, there is Calpech, right? These exist during 1200 years before Christ, up to 400 years before Christ, before this actually started. But what I can tell you, when the archaeologists were working at Acton Khan and Buena Vista del Cayo, it seems like the distance in between is very small. Competitions for architecture seems to be occurring there, probably because of establishment of probably a city rather than a town. Resources or landmass is very small, where they have to compete in architectures to unite the two together to become like a state, right? And this is what causes the downfall of Acton Khan. When Acton Khan declined, rapid growth existed at Buena Vista del Cayo. 1,000 years before Christ, quarter mile down from here, there are early buildings where the Mayan people used wooden altars. 400 years before Christ, there are buildings that existed on that side. 600 years after the death of Christ, all of these is well occupied. There are buildings. So in case if you want to excavate here, you will find the plaster floor. When you cut through the floor, you will find the bedrock. These are the early, seems to be the Maya quarrying the ridge top to make a courtyard. They plaster it. Then they place dedications of buildings, seems to be like offering or even burial of children or adults, probably to provide strength for buildings. Right? But there are pre-classic buildings that existed down here. But we do not know exactly whether the inhabitant of that building moved, they went to join other groups. We do not know. All the archaeologists find out that they modified that early buildings and they built the palace on top. That's what I think. Frontal occipital, that's the term that they use, which means a board being placed here and a board being placed here that gives probably just a bulging size and seems to be a cone shape. And there's another term that they use, tabular oblique, which means just seems to be one flat board which wraps with a cotton. It only shapes part of the forehead into a flat area. But then the analysis that occurs on the teeth seems to be occurring in their early teens. They started to drill these teeth. This existed based on analysis discovered, observations of the bones. When the baby is very young, cranium is very small. So this seems to be a board, probably a bead in the center of the eyes to make that feature. We strained the muscles of the eye to make it cross. So this is the people who they considered with the third eye. Probably what we can see, what they see, we are unable to see. Right? That's what I can tell you. So there are evidences that are discovered.
Okay, so there are some cranial. Is there a reason why, in a sense of, were they trying to mimic something from previous cultures, or did they basically come up with the idea?
It seems to the archaeologists that they tried to actually become one of their god. This is what most archaeologists will tell you. And why this existed probably is because of dramatical or a dressful change in the society that actually leads these people to consider themselves as supernatural individual. And also this existed is based on what they call royal status, right? It has royal classes because the king seems to be a bloodline in their early stage. And this is why I tried to let you know that young males are somehow important in the early times, but in the later times when the society did not actually look at these people as important people anymore, females started to take that advantage of governing the state. This is what existed.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Okay, yeah, answers that question.
Let's get them to a picture. Diachrome pottery, beautiful jars, ornamental goods is discovered here. But it's not discovered on the floor. They did the trenching on the bed form that you're looking at, where they discovered a tomb. The body of the king is sealed, but those are just some of the goods that is discovered together with the body itself. Cylindrical vases, polychrome pottery, jade element, necklaces.
Is the body still down
It's
here?
still there, sir.
That's good that they leave it.
They preserve it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where they find game graffiti on the floor too, apart from just at the top of the palace. They also find it over here.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly the purpose of the game. It's not something that is well understood as far as I know. Whether it just leads to human sacrifices or providing of rituals or it's other just entertainment, we do not know.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, if this is what they call the palace, we're looking at throne to
Mhm.
determine the city as an independent. But the panel that is discovered here, just like the panel that provides the original name of the city, it has the emblem glyph of Naranjo state. Naranjo is just 13 kilometers west from here in the Guatemala territory. And it had been devastated by the power of Caracol in the 633 AD, where he begins a small hiatus, but organizing kings allows it to become powerful in the 680 AD, and 682 AD is when he revenged the war against Caracol itself, and that marks the destruction of Caracol state and begin their hiatus. So when the return of the enemy to Naranjo, it seems to be sort of an probably like a major political issues where huge party existed there, large celebration existed there, ceremonial activity occurs, and you see a strong relationship between Xunantunich and Naranjo back in those times, which marks Xunantunich as a satellite city.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the reason why you don't find the throne even here, but this is what they call the major office of the kings, right?
Mm-hmm.
The internal stairs is this one. Okay.
Open again.
Okay. This is a staircase that allows the king to reach into his upper part of his residence. Today we don't see how big the palace is. This is the wall that goes up into a box farm. So the massive area on the top is where he lives together with his family. They find jars, they find grindstones of the Maya, they find dishes and cups all the way in their living quarters, but it does not provide evidences of food source. It provides evidences of distribution of food sources taking place over there. This is also a partial original that you're looking at, the plaster that you see there. So it gives you an understanding of how fine the plaster of the Mayan building was before, right?
This here.
Those are just people that are coming in right now doing some sort of graffiti
Mm.
on the buildings. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Good. Thank you. Long time ago. You like a picture, sir?
Yeah, I would love one, yeah.
Okay.